I have recently come to the conclusion that Finchinator is, in fact, without any doubt, the Tracy Morgan of Smogan. Think about it. Anyway, welcome to another overly long podcast with a mild visual component. Today, instead of our usual Gens 1 through 5, we're going to be going over some Gen 8. Now, I don't play Sword and Shield. I have zero interest in it. I haven't touched it in a long time. And I don't even watch it. The few games I've clicked on that have been linked on Discord, I look at, don't like what I see, and click away very quickly. But I saw that there was a Magearna suspect test, and a very unexpected wave of nostalgia just washed over me. I was reminded of my current gen suspect testing days. In Black and White 2, the first test I participated in was the one that banned Sandvale and brought Garchomp back to OU. And I just wanted to participate, and I decided, you know what, it might be fun, it might make for a good video, so here we are. I already got the requirements. I was initially going to record myself laddering the 40 or more games required to to be able to vote on Magearna. Here you see minimum GXC with 40 games played. I was lucky enough to get it in 40 games exactly. So there was that. But then I realized, this is a gen I don't touch, and I don't concentrate as well when I'm also talking to the metaphorical camera. So I would probably be better off just focusing without that, and then doing this kind of video after, so I'm not figuring things out on the fly. And now I've been able to collect my thoughts, and I have an actual opinion of the metagame now. So I actually wrote a post in this thread if you want to check that out. That's a summary of Magearna itself, and why I think that it should be banned, because, yeah, I'm anti-Magearna. There have been some a lot of junk posts in this thread, which is normal, and then some good posts, like ABR doesn't think it should be banned, but I can't agree with that. I'm very anti-Magearna, and I'll explain. Well, I explained why in this post, but I'll explain more in this video, as well as the state of the metagame overall from my experience with it. And I recognize that ladder is a different beast from tournaments, of course, but I got the general picture of the metagame. I looked into some replays just to, replays, sample teams, just to get a glimpse, and then I had a few practice games before setting out on my laddering account, which was ban boots, because I don't like heavy-duty boots. Again, so this thread is about Magearna itself, but this video is going to have Magearna and the state of the metagame as a whole, and my very informed ideas. I mean, I say that sarcastically, but I do think the ideas I have are reasonable. And I got voting requirements, so that makes me an authority. Jokes. Anyway, so after I was hit by this wave of nostalgia and decided, hey, maybe I want to ladder for this Magearna thing, I hit up the Tracy Morgan of Smogan and asked, hey, buddy, can you get me some teams I can ladder with? And I won't do a Tracy Morgan impression, because that would go badly, but he was kind enough to give me some. So I asked for Sun, because I had seen Brofist melt stuff with Specs Charizard, and I thought that was really cool. And of course had Cinderace, which is another hot button topic right now. And I tested it out, and I was like, well, this team is going to be inconsistent. So I figured it's probably not the best for laddering. And I had also asked Finch for a more balanced team, with Specs Magearna in particular, because I had heard that that was the Devil set, as well as another controversial poke in Cinderace, and he was like, here you go, this covers most stuff. And yeah, as I played, I made some changes. I gave Hippo some mild SpDef investment, because I'm not an expert Sword and Shield player, but I have been an expert on Hippowdon for a while, and I know that, this defense is going to be enough, and a little special defense goes a long way. In particular against Volcarona, who I was terrified by. I definitely played more Volcaronas than I didn't. It felt like every game 3 out of 4 at least had a Volk, and it was scary every single time, so I figured give myself as much recourse against it as possible. Yeah, so there was that change. This change, which probably wasn't so good, I was paranoid of a nasty plot Hydreigon, I think, and so I took off the 44 defense EVs on Mandibuzz and stuck them into Spadef. If I were to play again, then I would, probably put them back, because I definitely would have appreciated them more against Urshifu in particular. God, I didn't really know what that thing did before I started playing, but good lord, that thing is terrifying. Dark Urshifu, not the water one. I imagine my surprise, midway through laddering, I was like, what? There's a water one too? That was not fun. Anyway, I would have put the defense back in for Urshifu and stuff like Rillaboom, Excadrill Insurance. God, Excadrill is everywhere. I realize I'm not saying these little metagame observations are not news to any experienced Sword and Shield player, but I'm giving my experience of how I viewed the metagame through the lens of someone who hadn't touched it before and quickly understood it pretty decently. And we'll get to my actual thoughts on what's good and what's bad in terms of the tier's health and whatnot. So I would definitely put the defense back for Urshifu and Excadrill and Rillaboom, and one other thing that I'm forgetting. Oh, Cinderace, of course. You can never have Cinderace insurance, especially because Excadrill likes to throw out Toxic, and then one of your other pokes is going to have to compensate. Toxapex, Pex is nuts, man. Absolutely nuts. And Scald knockoff games are something one of my less favorite components or aspects of Sword and Shield is the trick and knockoff abundance without any real way to stop it. For all their faults, Megas and Z crystals, then they helped out a lot in that regard, and we're seeing that with their absence in full force in Gen 8. So then Specs Magearna, the Pokemon of the hour, I gave it some bulk because I like bulk, and I think that a little goes a long way on something as naturally bulky and with such great typing as Magearna. And I wasn't sure on the speed benchmark, so I just said, you know what, I'll keep it at above Life Orb Clefable, just in case I run into one of those. I did run into one, I think, and I would also outspeed Zero Speed Rotom, if that's a thing. And then Cinderace, this was a pretty big change, and actually this one I stand by entirely, that I knew as a symbol that I knew what I was doing, at least somewhat. So the set, as Finch explained in the thread somewhere, I think up here, Cinderace apparently was not too much of a threat until people started using the Pyro Ball, Gunk Shot, Zen Headbutt U-Turn set, and that was originally the set he had on this team, as well as Brofist had on the Sun team. And his was Jolly, but I saw a lot of people were talking about Adamant, and I checked speed tiers, and I was like, you know what? That was fine. And the only time I got outsped by something that wouldn't have outsped me if I'd been Jolly was an Alolan Ninetales, so that didn't really matter too much. And then, so the moveset. So I really wasn't feeling Gunk, and I mean, now if I were to play again, just like I would put the defense EVs back on Mandibuzz, I would probably put Gunk Shot back over Court Change, because Togekiss is incredibly annoying, and Primarina is obnoxious as well, and it would help against Clef. So in retrospect, I don't fully support the Court change, but I was getting paranoid of those Mew Hyper Offense teams and Alolan Ninetales, and I just wanted another option of turning the hazards back on my opponent, because I think Court Change is such a ridiculous move. So I wanted more than just Mandibuzz's Defog. Cinderace as a whole is absolutely insane. I still think Court Change has a place on it, but I would, here at least, I would have preferred Gunk Shot. Sucker Punch, though, I really am firm on this one. This one carried me. It was so crucial. Initially, I put it on the Sun team because I was afraid of other Cinderace for good reason. And this team is more secure against Cinderace, but you can't really ever have too much insurance. And I wound up loving it because it was so useful against everything. Dragapult, I mean, it absolutely drops Dragapult, even from full health, or, slight chip, like Stealth Rock and Lefties, oh, it's dropping. Insurance against boosted Volcarona, finishing off weakened Shift Gear Magearna, outpacing Belly Drum Azumarill if Dragapult was weakened. Excadrill and Sand, it was incredible. I loved having Sucker Punch, and I would not take it off. So I was firm on that one. As a whole, I gotta say, the hype is real regarding Cinderace. It is absolutely nuts. Finally, with Dragapult, I gave it some bulk, and I was glad to see that Finch had a modest Dragapult, because I had liked that when I had been toying around with Sword and Shield prior. And he had Thunder Wave over Will-O-Wisp, but I wound up liking Will-O-Wisp more because while Wisp is not as good against Clefable, I liked Will-O-Wisp more to pressure Mandibuzz. Just a little bit. Because Chip racks up really quickly, because there's a lot of opportunities for Pokemon to throw around knockoff, chip damage. There's lots of boots flying around, so no immediate lefties. So yeah, I figured the 6% isn't a lot, but it'll help. It can be the difference between Magearna checking Cinderace one-on-one and it falling to it, especially because it weakens Foul Play. I also burned a lot of Excadrills that tried to lead off, and that was useful because then later I could use Dragapult to spin block them. If they were trying to get a spin off later, I could just switch in Dragapult, not mind if they used Earthquake because they were already burned, and I would keep the rocks up. Not that rocks mattered, because one of my grievances with the tier was definitely Volk, because I realize that hazards can sometimes be oppressive, so I guess this is the first of my thoughts on the metagame. I realize that hazards can sometimes be oppressive, but at the same time, I think they are important to keep dangerous Pokemon in check naturally. And I think Cinderace is another example of how insane boots can be, of course, but something as mind-blowingly dangerous as Volcarona, I mean, even without hidden power in the game anymore, nothing matters. You can't do anything prior to prevent it from setting up other than trying to pivot a Pokemon that doesn't let it set up and ideally threatens it, which is obviously not always going to be the case, because you are going to have to switch to your Mandibuzz at some point. Because what else checks Urshifu? More on that in a second, but yeah, Volk was definitely dangerous, incredibly dangerous, and I was ruining facing it. I was like, well, I can maintain my rocks, but it's not really helping, so I'm going to have to dance around it by sacrificing Toxapex to make sure it doesn't get multiple boosts, and then hoping Cinderace blows through their team. So it was ugly. I didn't care for that, and that was another reason why I'd consider going back to T-Wave on Dragapult, because it would mess up Volk. So especially with Infiltrator for the occasional subset. So yeah, T-Wave was probably a better choice there, but I did like Will-O-Wisp a lot. Maybe could even mess with both statuses. I really would have liked that, actually. Anyway, yeah, I also preferred burning opposing Magearnas. Anyway, so yeah, my laddering account was ban boots, and that's the first of my thoughts on Sword and Shield. I don't know if boots need to be banned, but I think some of their more prominent abusers need to be looked at. Example, even something like Togekiss, which you don't really think of as a humongous threat, without boots, it suddenly becomes so much more dangerous to deal with. Oh, Alakazam, that's what I wanted Max Spadef Mandibuzz for. I was terrified of Nasty Plot Zam. Not that, extra Spadef would have really made much of a difference. I'd still take it out and put it back in defense, but that was another thing I was afraid of. So boots are nuts. I mean, even something like Boots Zeraora, I was stunned at how much more difficult it was to deal with. You don't think about Boots Zeraora as being a big deal because it's not Stealth Rock neutral, and you think, well, you can just run lefties, but it really does make so much more of a difference. And wearing it down, and I don't think Sword and Shield could be considered power crept because so much of the metagame is bulky cores. But in a way, I guess you could because it's certain Pokemon forcing the metagame into those bulky cores. Cinderace, you're not out-offensing Cinderace. And Urshifu is similarly dangerous. And those guys, force you into these specific counters. A Hippo for Cinderace and Mandibuzz for Urshifu. And it's pretty crazy because then they just U-turn out and go to Specs Magearna, and there's not really much you can do about it. So hazards wearing the opponent down is a good thing, and when you throw stuff like Zeraora in as another offensive threat that can also use switch moves, and you put boots on it so it's not getting worn down passively, which can be the difference between it living in attack or not living in attack. It makes things a lot harder to deal with, and even for a metagame that has a lot of bulky teams, it's hard to not feel under constant pressure by the metagame's offensive threats sometimes, which is why I think they should be looked at. So let's go to the Pokemon of the hour, Magearna. Like we said, Cinderace is also incredibly controversial, and some people think it should have been tested first. Fine, whatever. I definitely think it should be tested. I think Cinderace is absolutely insane. But the thing with Cinderace and Urshifu is that they force in these counters, and you turn out with ease, and then you have a lot of choices of what specific big choiced Pokemon you want to go to. You're gonna always have some good option for scaring a Pokemon out, you turning out on your counter, and then bringing in your big choiced breaker to dish out more damage to the opposing team. Like Specs Magnezone is really dangerous. CB Rillaboom is nuts, and you're always going to have more and more ways to pressure the opponent. Even CB Scizor, I noticed, was pretty threatening on its own, and you can do all sorts of stuff. But I think that Magearna is too good to be constantly put in the position of, well, I have a free turn and there's nothing you can do about it, because Magearna has so many tools to mess the opponent up. It obviously is incredibly strong. Floor Cannon does not care about resists. Even physically defends Toxapex, which you gotta be running because of Urshifu and Cinderace and other strong physical pals like Rillaboom. Even that takes over 40%. I think it's 40% minimum against this spread. So it's nuts. So with rocks up and chip damage, maybe it got Scald Burn, maybe it got knocked off, maybe it took prior damage because Regenerator doesn't do everything. You can put pressure on it, and that's best case if it uses Floor Cannon. Obviously, Volt Switch. I mean, some people think that Toxapex soaks Volt Switch for free. But because the net damage isn't that much, but I gotta tell you, that's just not true, because it's not always going to be at full HP. Volt Switch does a ton, and like we said, Knock, Scald, Rocks, prior damage, yikes. And of course, ground immunes do not really want to switch into Magearna, because Floor Cannon blows them up. Magearna OHKOs so many Pokemon, and there are so few switches to it. Like, this team is actually a great example. Mandibuzz, you're forced to go to Mandibuzz on Urshifu or Toxapex if you're okay with having to regenerate off a Wicked Blow, especially with Rocks up. Which I personally wasn't, because I needed to keep Toxapex as healthy as possible for as much as possible, like Volk. And Urshifu just U-turns out, and in comes Specs Magearna, and you're like, well, now what do I do? Best case, I was never going to risk Hippowdon to a Floor Cannon. That was just not worth it. So, best case, they Floor Cannon and hit my Pecs, and I have to recover if I want to actually be healthy for the next time. Gear doesn't really want to trick Pecs because it gets Black Sludge, but it's still, and Pex is still annoying even when it's locked into a choice item just because it exists. But it was, Volt Switch is nothing to sneeze at. So, and you might think, well, with this coverage, what about Excadrill? And, Magearna Well, it can also trick the blobs, which is incredibly annoying, meaning even heavy-duty Boots Blissey, who wouldn't get annoyed by hazards in conjunction with Volt Switch, even that gets absolutely ruined. I think that pushes it over the edge almost on its own. But it also has other coverage moves, because it has Aura Sphere, and that drops not only Excadrill, but Ferrothorn. So, it's just so difficult to switch into, and all you really got to do is just change 1 or 2 moves on Specs alone. Specs was the main set I have experience with, because that's the set I use in every single game for voting recs, and every single game I was astounded at how easily Mag got in and just threatened kills. You know, Mandibuzz U-turn out of Clef, here's Magearna, Specs Flash Cannon threatens to Oko, Floor Cannon, Oko's Hippo. Volt Switch keeps momentum, brings in the dangerous Cinderace for free. Trick for bulky teams, yikes. Dragapult does similar stuff. You know, U-turn out of Mandibuzz, here comes Magearna. It was really ugly. I think while there's always going to be Pokemon that you're going to U-turn into and get them in for free, and they're going to threaten to blow up your opponent, I think they're fine, but I think Mag is too good. Because even something like Analytic Specs Magnezone and CB Rillaboom, they have their answers within the metagame. Whereas Mag, it's... I mean, there's always going to be that you can predict around it, but you really can't predict around it because it has such great coverage and such high power. It has coverage for pretty much anything it wants to hit, really. And it's even resists are not enough because, I mean, something like Rotom Heat with Boots takes an absolute ton from Floor Cannon. That is, if you don't Volt Switch out and threaten to Draco with Dragapult and U-turn and keep the cycle going on and on and on. So I think Mag is definitely too good to be allowed in that position. So another one of my thoughts on Sword and Shield is, obviously we know there's a ton of U-turn and Volt Switch and Teleport. And I am personally not a fan of that dynamic. I mean, I'm not going to be campaigning for it to be banned. But I think... Well, first of all, that's another point against Boots for sure, because, I mean, a regenerating Pokemon like Slowbro teleporting is already crazy enough. But, you know, Boots Pokemon teleporting, you know, making the spamming of U-turn and Volt Switch so riskless. I mean, on one hand, yeah, you could say Boots are good for the metagame because suddenly you don't have to deal with hazard pressure while checking threats, and that is nice. But at the same time, it goes both ways because suddenly you can use these incredibly powerful moves without their drawback. And their drawback was always, you know, if there are entry hazards up, you are hurting your own Pokemon by using these moves. Barring, of course, Teleport Clefable, which is part of why Teleport Clef is so crazy. But that's the whole idea. Like, Cinderace U-turning back and forth, and Zeraora being another example. And the teleporters, you know, Blissey, Clef, Slowbro. So I think Mandibuzz, how am I forgetting that one? So while not every U-turn, Volt Switch, and Teleport user uses Boots, several of the big ones do, and I feel like without Boots, then it would be a lot more palatable. So I don't know. That's just a thought. I saw the idea of Boots getting banned thrown around, and at first I was like, oh come on, you want to ruin the thing that lets you switch around? And then I realized, oh no, that's too much. Something like a Volt Switching Rotom Heat as well. I mean, that can be really frustrating. I mean, you think not having leftovers is a big deal, and you have to be terrified of knockoff. Yeah, that's true. Again, knockoff. A lot of undesirable elements flying around. But, you know, that not having leftovers is so outweighed by the utter freedom you have switching into Stealth Rock, or switching around with Stealth Rock up, and not having to worry about that impeding your ability to get your big guys in. An example, I tricked a couple heavy-duty Boots away from Blissey's, and I was amazed at how good heavy-duty Boots were on Magearna. Stealth Rock resistant Pokemon. It made a huge difference. It's not being able to, my opponent not being able to wear down Mag just for switching around with rocks up. I think rocks are a good thing for competitive pokes, and I know hazards can be annoying, but I would much rather have hazards around to check these dangerous Pokemon than to have these dangerous Pokemon running around less checked. That said, you know, if Boots stay around, that's fine, obviously, but I'm not a fan of them, thus my alt name. So, yeah. And the point being that there's a lot of switch moves going around in the game, so you are going to be getting big choice breakers like Magearna, and Magearna being the best one, of course, really easily. That's always going to be part of the metagame. I think it would be a little less emphasized without Boots, but since the focus is Magearna, then we're going to accept the dynamic of, yeah, if I want to, I'm always going to be able to U-turn out of the forced counter, because you can't not go to your counter against Urshifu, so it just clicks U-turn, especially because you can't protect on it because of Unseen Fist. So you go to your counter, and then a big breaker comes in. That is always, going to be part of the metagame. And that's fine. I don't think you're going to ban switch moves. You can mitigate them by dropping Boots, but that's another story. But I think while the others, your Rillabooms and Magnazones being the examples that stood out most to me, because they are really strong and they have switch moves to further maintain momentum. So Magearna is just too good to be in that position because it's so difficult to deal with. The options to deal with it are just not there at this moment. People say, oh, well, there will be more mag checks with the next DLC. And to that I say, you know what? Fine. You can test Magearna in the next DLC if you think it'll be better. But right now, there's still going to be some I don't know when the next DLC comes out, and I really don't care. But I think Melmetal was tested fairly soon after it was banned. So, really, who cares? Bring it back once it's gotten the more checks in the metagame, but for now, I don't think people should have to sit through it. It's really annoying. And this is just on the strength of the spec set. I quickly learned about the power of the Double Dance set through my laddering adventures, and it was nightmarish to say the least. I had a record of, humble brag time, 37-3, and I think that Shift Gear Double Dance Mag was responsible for 2 of them. So that's not exactly the most damning indictment, but I felt that it could snowball out of hand very quickly, because all it takes is a free turn, and with something like Magearna that has such great typing and defensive stats, you're never going to be able to never give it a free turn. It is always going to find that opportunity. And sure, sometimes it needs both boosts, but it's also not that difficult for it to stack both. And plus it can even change up its move pool. I mean, it can throw around Iron Defense and suddenly it's setting up in Cinderace's face. It gets ugly. And the fact it has Draining Kiss now, so it dumps on even Chansey and Blissey. Yikes. That was a little shocking. So yeah, I think the sweeper set just, adds insult to injury, because I would ban Mag off the strength of the spec set alone, but the spec set is just devastating. It's too strong. It has too many options to cripple the opponent. And even if the options not only are very few, but are prediction reliant as hell, because, it can just keep momentum on you with Volt Switch. If you have a safer counter like Amoonguss, not like Spec Slash Cannon does a ton to it on the Switch, but yeah, sure. Amoonguss actually is pretty good. I found, and I also thought Ferrothorn was excellent. I don't know why people didn't spam him more. But yeah, Magearna has options for everything. Can even start pulling out Ice Beams if it feels so inclined. Not that it should, I don't think, on specs at least, but it also has Assault Vest sets, which I didn't think were anything special, but they're not supposed to be. They're defensive Assault Vest sets. So definitely specs, and then the Double Dance set, too much. I mean, you're always going to be able to play around a relatively slow wall breaker in some capacity, but because you're going to be able to outspeed it with strong offensive Pokemon, like Cinderace is the go-to for everyone. It's pretty much sack to Magearna, bring in Cinderace. Or, best case, you can switch into its floor cannon once, maybe twice if you have a max special defense Excadrill, which this team enjoyed facing because of Dragapult and Hippo together, as well as Mandibuzz slow turning on it for Cinderace death. So, yeah, Matt, and of course this is because I wasn't running Aura Sphere, which would also mess up Ferrothorn and Magnezone in addition. So, yeah, it's just too much. It'd be different if it had to really fight for every position on the field, but when it's not even I don't know, it's pretty easy. If Urshifu didn't have U-turn, it could still double switch fairly easily as Mandibuzz was forced to come in. But, the fact that, you can U-turn, chip Mandibuzz, and then you're already worse against Urshifu later before staring down the massive Specs Magearna. Specs Magnezone is palatable, but Magearna is even worse because Zone and Rillaboom, at least they have less incredible typing and not so good bulk. So you can't really just drop Magearna with any random attack. I'm not saying those guys are frail, but Magnezone has a lot of big weaknesses and not terrific bulk overall, especially on the special side. And of course, on the physical side, it has some of the worst weaknesses to have in fighting and ground and fire. So, whereas Rillaboom is fairly exploitable as well. So, I think those guys are good examples of Pokemon that, yeah, if we're going to have all this U-turning, volt-switching, teleporting, getting in these huge guns over and over, yeah, okay, that's fine, because those guys are big and strong, but they have their drawbacks. Not to say that Magearna is perfect, but I think it's very clearly above them and very clearly too much to handle when given so many free turns. There just aren't options against it. The few options there are all marred by their inability to handle Magearna making a slight change. And this is just with Specs, again, not even Double Dance. So, I mean, so that's Magearna. I definitely think it should be gone. I think boots are crazy. I think it would help with all the constant pivoting we have, the constant, easy, effortless pivoting we have. It would definitely make Cinderace not nearly as good. I think Cinderace without boots would... I don't know if it'd be such a clear Uber. I think it'd be a lot more contentious. But right now, I think there's no question Cinderace has got to go. As for Urshifu, I'm not sure, because it does... I don't know. I think it's maybe in the future, but for now it's manageable. Although, I gotta say, I really don't appreciate how it's already such a massive threat, and it just pops a U-turn on the few counters it has, or few switch-ins it has, and then suddenly they are unable to switch into it later. Fairly simple, fairly ridiculous. But just to go back to Mag for one more minute, then if your tactic is to out-offense it, like I said earlier that my tactic against Volk was usually to sack against it and to out-offense with Cinderace. That generally worked because Volcarona teams are very offensive for the most part and don't have great Cinderace answers. Whereas, if you're trying to out-offense this team with Cinderace alone and you have to sack every time my Magearna comes in, which it is going to do because of the 3 U-turners on this team, then you're not going to get very far. And Hippo, of course, chips Cinderace with U-turn. Or because of Rocky Helmet, yeah. So, yeah, Mag was just nuts, and the responses to it are not good enough. Because the offensive responses can't switch in, and there are not they're not reliable, adequate defensive counters. So, I think that summarized it pretty well. Anyway, Cinderace, I think, is very clearly over the top. Sucker Punch was also good against Zam, although I didn't end up having to use it because after the game where I switched to Spadef Mandibuzz after just barely having escaped against a nasty plot Zam, then I had never faced it again. So, anyway, Cinderace I think is crazy because you can't really out-offense it. It's got such an incredible move pool. It's so fast. I mean, with Sucker Punch putting away Dragapult. And I guess Zen Headbutt would have been nice for against a couple Como O's, but Como wasn't really a problem because, again, Magearna, so You know, that's kind of the crazy thing about Cinderace. Whatever coverage it's missing on, it's just like, whatever, Magearna. Especially Gunk Shot. You know, I would have probably liked to have it over Zen Headbutt. Then again, Pex is annoying, so who knows, Gunk Shot or Zen Headbutt. But you know, if I don't have Gunk Shot against Fairies, I can just go to Magearna most of the time. So, yeah, I definitely support Adamant Cinderace. It's crazy how much stronger it is. Really threatens Clef with just Pyro Ball, Mandibuzz, Chipped Hippo. So yeah, it's so fast, it's so strong. And, you know, even, Sucker Punch even blows through Zeraora pretty well. That was another common thing. You know, when in games where they had Grass Knot and I chipped it with Hippo, but not quite enough, and suddenly I pull out the Sucker Punch Cinderace and I wasn't in trouble anymore. So, yeah, Sucker Punch Cinderace is just absolutely insane, and I definitely would think it's worth giving up Gunk Shot or Zen Headbutt. Maybe there's room for core change, but it's just nuts. So I think Cinderace is fairly self-evident. But without Boots, man, I don't know. I don't think it would be that bad without Boots, and I think Boots, like we went over earlier, Boots are just not they're too freeing. There's got to be drawbacks to strong Pokemon, to certain Pokemon, and there's just not enough of a drawback with them. I mean, Cinderace, I had games where I was U-turning at 1% constantly with Rocks Up. And I get that that's the whole point of the Boots to begin with, but it's for such a strong Pokemon to be able to do that, it was just insane. So I was also amazed at how strong its U-turn is. I guess never underestimate Libero or Protean, but yeah, it's fast, it's strong, it doesn't die because of Boots, and you know, when people are complaining about Cinderace and Volcarona, you know, when without Boots they would not be nearly as bad, and Boots are also contributing to other things like a simple Nasty Plot Overheat Rotom Heat is crazy, because with Rocks Up you don't want to switch Dragapult in for getting statused or Volt Switched on, and it just survives forever and poses a massive threat, and it's just like, well, where's the drawback in this thing? You know, don't switch it into a knockoff, not that hard. So, yeah, I definitely think Boots are lame, and they exacerbate not only the big, strong Pokemon like the Volcarona. I can't emphasize enough how much I dislike Volcarona just being able to chill at 100% for the entire game, no matter what you do beforehand. And then, of course, they make the teleporting stuff even nastier. So yeah, I'm not a fan of those. Let's see, what else did I encounter on ladder? I encountered a ton of Rocky Helmet regenerators. I mean, I thought, I also saw some Slowbros and Amoonguses with Boots, but a ton of them with Rocky Helmets, you know, just as anti-Cinderace as possible. And even then, it manages to be such a menace, because you turn to Magearna. I didn't upload all the replays of my ladder run. I was originally going to do it live, and then I realized that would be a disaster waiting to happen. But I did get a couple. So let me see. This was the first game I had. Not the first game. The first game I uploaded. Let me skim through. I'm not really focusing on the games themselves. I don't remember much, and whatever dumb stuff happened, you can be excused by ladder. But oh, look, here's where my Hydreigon fears were born. And look at that team my opponent is running. The Boots Rotom Heat and the Boots Cinderace. You know what? We'll have to look at this game. And the Urshifu. Oh my! I mean, this team is. I'm not gonna say it's everything wrong with Sword and Shield, because there's no Magearna, but it is a very good example of several aspects of it that I find not to my taste. So I don't know how long this replay is. Oh, I didn't lead off with Mandibuzz. I had Hippo in. Yes, so, see, Rotom is nuts. I gotta say, I think Sand is a little underappreciated. T-Tar definitely has gotta make a comeback in the future. So, See, looky. Oh, I got up my rocks with this thing. I think I let him knock off like everything. Oh, see, yeah. I definitely wish I had more moves on Toxapex. I mean, some people are saying that the balance wars are not so good for the metagame, and I mean, look, I don't hate balance wars. I recognize that the excruciatingly slow pace of a lot of games can be, is not necessarily a good thing, but I don't think it's a bad thing to be dealing with, because I would much rather have that than, you know, constant pressure from a couple broken offensive pokes. And the metagame is kind of even forced into using these defensive cores because of the power of Urshifu and Magearna and Cinderace especially, because again, you're not out offensing Cinderace, you're going to have to wall it instead. Oh, there was yeah, that Draco miss was lame. So made a good prediction there, but yeah, I don't know. You can never truly predict the future for metagames, but I think it would be the answer to there are tough balance cores, I don't think is necessarily keep a probably broken Pokemon in the metagame just so you have a chance at breaking them. I think when you have to deal with less huge oppressive threats, then the options to deal with annoying things like these balance cores becomes a lot more plentiful. And I think another thing is not just Magearna and Cinderace and Urshifu forcing these specific balance cores, like Pex and Mandy for Banned Urshifu, which isn't even necessarily very good against bulk upsets, which also has Sucker Punch, which is crazy. I mean, Banned Urshifu alone is crazy, but the bulk upset is... Every time I faced the bulk upset, I was like, yeah, Banned is annoying, but this is so much worse. So, anyway, I guess maybe should have looked into a Clefable team. Regardless, there was something I was saying. Yeah, so I think another problem with the balance cores is that the boots are enabling huge offensive threats as well as defensive, and so people feeling stifled against the defensive ones are, they have good reason for it. But I don't know. Again, I'm still new to the current Sword and Shield metagame, but I definitely have enough experience to an understanding of Pokemon as a whole to understand that Magearna and Cinderace are not desirable elements to have in a metagame, and I think boots are making things worse. So, the complaints I mainly see: Mag is too much, Cinderace is too much. Boots make things like Cinderace and Volk crazy, and even things like Rotom Heat and Zeraora are nuts. The Zeraora thing I hadn't read anywhere, I just experienced it. But there was... And then, in tournament play, everyone's going, all these bulky cores. And it's like, yeah, you're forced into using these bulky cores because of these Pokemon. So... yeah, I'm trying to gather all my thoughts. You're forced into using these bulky cores with all these Pokemon, and if you're not forced into that because those Pokemon aren't around, then I think the options to break through these cores would expand because you're not having as tough a time dealing with them. So there was that. Magearna didn't do much in this game because of his 2 fire types and constant pressure from the dark type switching in. This is not the kind of team Mag really shines on, although should have probably used it against Como more. And because this team does not switch into Specs Floor Cannon at all, so I probably should have taken more chances. So that was more on my playing than anything else. Let's see. I don't remember this game. I remember this game being annoying. Look, yeah, the Boots Togekiss was so irritating. Actually, I think that was a Scarf Togekiss, but I had a Scarf Protect Togekiss with Trick. Yeah. But I remember playing so many Boots Togekiss, I was so exasperated by it. Yeah, I'm pretty much repeating myself at this point, but I tricked the Pex. That was a good move on his end. I think I tricked back later. God, that does so much. Pex is nuts. So this wasn't a very good game. I think I wasn't trying to hide a game I lost, by the way. So, just in case, I gotta cover my bases, because I know what this kind of thing tends to be like, but the game wasn't that interesting, so this guy with Toxtricity was awesome. Ferrothorn is annoying. See, look at this. Magearna into Pharaoh, or into Hippo, and, you know, Clef, no good options, even with Ferrothorn, and I don't know why he went to Clef. I guess he was trying to soak Volt Switch without giving Cinderace a completely free switch. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, I think this one was interesting. Oh, and this one I remember because I managed to Toxic Cure him, which was awesome. And here I made a kind of a hasty move, and Magearna lives Rhyperior's Earthquake. And I was just thinking, this Pokemon is so bulky. It's insane. You know, no investment. I think this was before I made the 40 HP investment. You know, and there's Amoonguss not switching into Specs Flash Cannon, and I mean, yeah, he should have gone to Mantine first, but point of being that even against a team with this many measures against it, then there's always going to be something Magearna can do. So here's Cinderace, U-turn again, and another threat of death, and I floor cannon because Amoonguss was dead or too weak, and you know, it drops Mantine and drops Clefable, and nothing switches in, and it's crazy. And here we have another example of Urshifu being Urshifu, but I'm more mild because I'm able to out-offense it because Cinderace, and I went to Hippo just to get up rocks for, oh, the Kyurem, yeah. But I could have easily gone to Mag. So yeah, I think those are pretty much all my thoughts. I'm not crazy about the metagame as a whole, and I think it needs more Pokemon, but not certain Pokemon. I don't know. I think Slowbro's incredible, Ferrothorn's incredible, but I think right now the issues facing the tier are very clear. It's Mag, Cinderace, although you could kind of skip the Cinderace and help out with a lot of other options. You know, Volcarona and the endless switch moves without being punished by targeting boots. So those are my thoughts in summation. And Cinderace, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And here's Magearna again, off the U-turn, which you can't avoid because you got to switch to your counters in Cinderace. I want to just show that again because it illustrates what I've been talking about this whole time. So, I don't remember this game, but oof, those are some nasty Pokemon. Knockoff and then Hex and... yeah, Ladder was infuriating because people really don't care about their Pokemon. I mean, he was just ready to let Toxapex die. Not that he had great switch-ins, but... oh, this game was long as hell because I had to stall out the Primarina with Pex. Oh, yeah, there was Magearna coming into Toxapex and spamming Floor Cannon and killing stuff. I was aiming for the Rotom, but, you know, sure. Here is a great example of what I was talking about. This game was really long, so I'm just going to put it on hyper fast. But it was Mag posing a threat to a team with Blissey and Amoonguss, and Cinderace also being amazing, and I think I let him knock off like all my stuff. But he, yeah, see, he knocked off the Mag, I lost the Specs, and I'm still going to be good against it because I took Clef's leftovers, and I'm going to get knocked off again, but now I'm going to Flash Cannon. I don't know why he stayed in, but point being that if Blissey ever came in, or Amoonguss, then I could, you know, mess with them similarly, taking their items. So yeah, here's where it was. So, you know, here's Mag into Bliss, and there go the boots. And this was the game, I think, where the boots came in big, because I think I kept that Magearna at 65% despite rocks being up for a huge amount of the game. And Volt switching, Cinderace. There's the Rocky Helmet of Moongus I was talking about. So Moongus is great. Slowbro is nuts. I think Slowbro is absolutely incredible and should be used more. But yeah, this game was also really long, but the whole point is that Magearna and Cinderace are heads and shoulders above everyone, and boots are crazy too. And I mean, even Magearna is kind of doing making both points for me and showing how crazy it is just with boots of all things. It lost its specs immediately and still posed a massive threat to this stall team, which could not possibly wall it in a sense any harder. See, there it gets Volt switched in on, and see, that's why I think rocks are good, man. They keep big threats like this in check. Instead, we're switching between a Pokemon that's resistant to Stealth Rock and a Pokemon that's weak to Stealth Rock, and neither of them care about rocks at all, and there's just no way to pressure them. So, you know, constant pressure, constant pressure. And in a way, I think that's why regen boots pokes are also insane. You know, even more than heavy duty boots, regen pokes with boots are insane, even more than Rocky Helmet, because they similarly don't die. So, yeah, this was long. I'm gonna go to 999 just because it was only a couple more turns, but yeah, he forfeited at the end. Yeah, so there's that. Was there anything else? Oh yeah, here's one of these irritating Volcarona teams. Another reason I really liked Will-O-Wisp on Dragapult. There was a weird amount of Azumarill in the tier. Now, this Magearna is a lot more threatening to this team if they don't switch it into a Will-O-Wisp. And most of the time, those teams led Excadrill, which is why I led Dragapult so much, because it was so great against Excadrill. So, yeah, this fella in particular was running a Perish Trap Azumarill for some reason. And see, Rocks and Roarveil. Oh, he froze the Magearna, which would have mauled him otherwise. You know, spamming floor cannons and flash cannons. See, this was what I did every time against Volk. You know, Pyro Ball. Luckily, Cinderace lives a Psychic, but you know, with Veil, then it was nuts. Yeah, I got subbed, and I actually made this stupid Dragapult set was really messing with me, but Hippowdon turns out it wasn't good enough to beat Hippo. So, yes, Cinderace. Oh yeah, this was the game where I got outsped by it, and I was just stalling the Veil until I could get Dragapult in relatively risk-free. Yeah, there's the stupid thing, and got 2 more games, and we'll come in at just an hour short for me. Oh, here's a game where this player is running. Well, Magearna shows how it's ridiculous even against a team with, well, not great answers, but there just aren't that many great answers. I mean, we saw a game against a team with the best answers available, and it still steamrolled. Or helped its teammates steamroll. I mean, I think Magearna and Cinderace going back and forth is unfair, but I think even if Magearna was enabling something like a Rillaboom, that would be crazy too. Incidentally, Rillaboom Magearna is really good because you give gear passive recovery. So here comes the Volk, and this time I went to Hippo just to try and check it a different way. And got crit, and Cinderace lives one, so I don't remember much about this game. Oh, he dodged the floor cannon, which he couldn't. Well, I guess he went to Corviknight, but I think. Oh, I dodged T-Wave at least. So, see, Urshifu brings in. Well, if that was a bigger threat, then Urshifu bring in Mandibuzz. Not crazy, but here comes Magearna. I trick, and now even something like Volk getting choice specs is nasty because it takes away the threat level, and Gear gets some boots, which isn't going to be a problem because his Stealth Rocker died turn 1 because he didn't really have great options of switching because there aren't a ton of. I'm not saying like I'm facing super optimal teams here, or that it's representative of the real tournament metagame, because I know it's not, but I've been looking at the tournament teams as well, and they're not so much better off against Magearna, and I seem to remember more experienced Sword and Shield players dominating other experienced Sword and Shield players with Specs Magearna, so here's Toxpex being a hero. Gotta say, I don't think Toxpex should be banned at all, or any of those balance things. I think Toxpex is one of the few things holding the metagame together. So I would definitely take a slower metagame where you have to work to break balance over a metagame where you're forced into using balance because of the big threats that are towering over everything. So PP stalling, Specs Volcarona Fiery Dance. Guess you didn't see that so often as Dragapult takes the last one. U-turn. Oh look, it's Magearna again. I mean, I think Magearna, without switch moves, it's tough to say. Obviously, switch moves make it a lot worse. And the boots on the switch moves, because especially Cinderace plus gear is just yikes. So yeah, and I think this was the game. Oh yeah, the stupid Corv set, and Sucker Punch finishing Dragapult off. Yeah, that wasn't one of the games where it saved me against a Dragapult, but it was that. And this is the final game I have saved. Yeah, so Rain. I don't know what is up with all these Whirlpool guys, but God, Excadrill was absolutely everywhere, both offensive and defensive. But I was okay with that because rocks. I faced a couple of Pelipper Rain teams, and they were surprisingly annoying, but this was the last game. This was the game that I got Rex with. I think even if I lost this game, then I was going to have Rex because my GXC was high enough that I could afford a loss, but yeah, Mandibuzz's Overcoat. God, I wish I had some different moves on Mandibuzz sometimes, mainly something over Foul Play. Like knockoff would have been great. I would love to spam knockoff with Mandibuzz, but foul play is so important for Rillaboom and Excadrill. But on another team, knockoff Mandibuzz would definitely be my preference to further facilitate the breakage of other teams. So there's Dragapult spin blocking a burned Excadrill safely. Toxic is a price I'm willing to pay. There's Draco. Here's Barraskewda, which I was terrified of, and then I knew I had the tools, but still scary. And that's when he forfeits and I win. So, those have been my laddering adventures. Not too interesting, more anecdotes in comparison to my metagame observations. And I think Magearna, for now, it should go. With the next DLC, it can come back and be tested, just like Melmetal was. I don't know exactly how Melmetal went. I just know it was tested very soon after it was initially banned, because it was quick banned. And I think Magearna deserves the chopping block, and I think Cinderace deserves the chopping block as well, although I think Boots being banned would be a greater positive, because not only do you make Cinderace less likely to be banned, you also give the metagame a lot more options to A, break defensive teams, which everyone likes to complain about, and B, deal with certain threats and the problems of the metagame that people complain about. Volcarona with Boots, rightly so, because it's nuts, and they complain about all the U-turning, Volt Switch, and teleporting. Well, half the reason everyone U-turns and Volt Switches and teleports so much is because of Boots. So, yeah, we're gonna call it there. If you think I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, that's your prerogative. But I know that I will be voting ban on Magearna, and if there's another test for Cinderace, which I'm sure there will be, or Boots, or whatever, then I might play it, I might not. It's freeing to not know. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you took something from it. And I will catch you next time.